My name is Diane Bovenkamp. I'm the Vice President of Scientific Affairs with the Bright Focus Foundation, and I'm here with co-chairs of the Bright Focus Alzheimer's Fast Track to discuss some very important topics for Alzheimer's disease and related dementia today. So, Harry, can you introduce yourself?
My name is, yes, of course. My name is Professor Harry Stuybush. I'm from Maastricht University in the Netherlands, in Europe, and I'm involved here to really study the different aspects of Alzheimer's research in relation to comorbidities, and I'll explain that later in more detail.
I'm Frank LaFurla. I'm the Dean of the School of Biological Sciences at the University of California, Irvine.
I'm Cindy Lemire. I work at Brigham and Women's Hospital in the Ann Romney Center for Neurologic Diseases and hold a position on the faculty at Harvard Medical School in Boston.
All right, so we'll just get right into it. The first question I have here is there a role for nonprofits and institutions to support early career researchers?
Absolutely. We need the nonprofits to help cultivate and raise the next generation of researchers.
And I also think that at this time, there is tremendous opportunity through institutions, but especially through foundations. Many foundations, because of this increase in funding to NIH for Alzheimer's disease, many foundations and associations are now funding young investigators. And so at this point, I think it's really cool that many foundations and associations are really putting their efforts into helping young investigators transition in their careers, how to start their own labs and really move along that career path.
Yeah, because I know, especially what we're doing here today. I mean, the four of us and the three of you in particular have been involved for like a decade and more in doing the Bright Focus Alzheimer's Fast Track, which is essentially a master class for not only understanding what are all the relevant topics in Alzheimer's, but to help train them with how to write a grant and how to network. And at Bright Focus, we have postdoctoral fellowships, but we like to have the fast track to try and help them.
I guess the bottom line for me is that we need more scientifically trained people in the world, not less, right? Carl Sagan has this great quote that says we live in a society exquisitely dependent on science and technology, in which hardly anyone knows anything about science and technology. Right? And so for these major scourges and challenges, they're only going to be solved by the next generation of scientists.
Yeah.
So I would like to answer that it's basically not a necessity. It's essential that we have funding available from nonprofits. And why? We still haven't yet, at least I think, not a real cure for Alzheimer's disease. In addition, we see a sharp increase coming up of people who are suffering from Alzheimer's disease. So we need much more funding in the future from organizations like nonprofit organizations who have funding for young researchers to enter the field, to also pursue a scientific career in this disease.
And if I could add one more point, I guess, and it's that we're in a war, right? And we need everyone to participate to help us win this war. The government has a role to play, but private individuals do as well in helping to donate and fund research so we can move the field forward.
Yeah, and disease has no borders. People from all countries all over the world have
Absolutely.
Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, and so our organization has made a choice that there is no, we funded in 24 countries, so there's no citizenship requirement. So we go anywhere where we can find the next best idea for a cure.
And that's one of the great things about the Fast Track, right, is that it brings together people from all over the global community.
Absolutely.
Harry's from the Netherlands, right?
And we had more people from Europe here. We had people here from Korea who also like to participate. So it's a global effort, and Bright Focus is then really challenging a global effort in pursuing new scientists entering the field of Alzheimer's. That's a good point here.
And researchers as well as clinician researchers, because there's a need for people to be for clinicians and clinician scientists to be leading all of the clinical trials and taking care of patients. So another question here is, are there ideas that could be pursued to encourage minorities and women and underrepresented groups who are disproportionately impacted by Alzheimer's to help them lead independent research labs?
Absolutely. I mean, we know that diverse people create diverse ideas, and we know that for complex, problems like Alzheimer's, it's only going to be solved through diverse approaches. And one of the things that's needed are role models, and it's pretty clear. Just like women needed women role models to encourage them to go into science, I think the same thing is true for other minorities. They need to have role models. So we and our institutions need to collectively do a much better job of encouraging them to go and consider a scientific career. As a matter of fact, I think one of the things you're going to see a big sea change is in terms of college rankings. They're going to now, for the first time, really consider the impact on social mobility. How good are universities at giving opportunities from people from underprivileged classes the opportunity to get an education?
So what we're seeing right now is almost a reflection of the access to education 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so if we can make a change now.
I also think that one way to do this is to help encourage the scientists, but also to have those scientists then go out and engage with the community and really bring education and bring awareness of Alzheimer's disease out to the community and in a more global effort. It's a global problem, so we need global effort.
Yeah.
Well, we see similar and even more challenging changes in Europe in 3 countries, which is Sweden, the Netherlands, but also in Norway, to increase the proportion of women in science. Both the Netherlands and in Sweden, they took a drastic step. Maybe you like it here a lot. On Dutch universities and Swedish universities, for 1 year, no men are attracted anymore. So all positions are filled with only women. There was a lot of protest by Dutchmen, but the government said, we tried it for years, it doesn't work. Now we do it drastically. January 1st next year till January 1st, 2021, there are no positions open for men.
Those are in those 3 countries.
Yes. And this is a lot of discussion at the moment. They said we really would like to come to this increase. Still in those 2 countries, the percentage between women and men in science, it's about 22% for women and 78% for men, and the government wants to bring it to 40-60.
So you're mentioning, I mean, it's the funding agencies and the institutions and the scientists, but you also need the government involvement, and
Absolutely.
the government is voted in by the people, and so so everybody needs to move forward.
So we really can see that as a transition, but the transition is already clear. If you look to our first and second year university students, the majority are women. It's 70%, 72%. Yes. So basically, on the long run, there will be more women, but it takes too long.
Yes.
And the government has decided now they want to like to push it quickly now.
I think the same thing is true in the United States, where at the lower levels you see many more women, the higher percentage of women than men. But then as you go up the ranks, then the numbers reverse.
Yeah, and I think that there are some programs that are being developed and may be available now and more in the future for increasing awareness, helping with the training and retention and a lot of that too also has to do with supporting not just women but men and women. If family is an issue that might make people self-select, drop out, then we need to create some kind of support network that that people will feel like they can still pursue.
So it is, I think the big thing now is that increasingly there are more and more females represented in faculty, at least in the US. I would say that's pretty true.
Yeah.
But you're right, as you go to the higher levels, there are fewer and fewer women. The percents really drop. But part of that is because it takes a while to get there. So you look back 30 years and the number of females that were actually trying to go in that track, may have started out high but really dropped. And in my own career, I've seen women go through, trying to make it and making decisions to do something else, and it doesn't necessarily mean dropping out of the workforce or dropping out of a career in academic medicine. I've had people trained in my lab that went on to do other things like become scientific writers, which has a lot more flexibility. So it's not necessarily true that everyone's dropping out, that they're not pursuing a career anymore, but they may find different careers.
Or in academia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it could be implicit bias, right? Women are traditionally not good at selling themselves the way men are. I mean, I know my daughter went, applied to medical school, and it was just so interesting to see the way she filled out the application and responded to questions the way I would have done it, even though she was incredibly talented. And they say that men, if they have 6 out of 10, attributes for qualifications for a job apply. Women don't apply unless they have like 9.8, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I lived that with my own daughter. It was very interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, like Bright Focus is, and many other funders have been, we know there is research out there that, we try and make sure that we don't have, that we comb through the wording of our RFPs, and we make sure that we don't put in wording that can make someone self-select and not apply. We also try and just always have reminders of, our review committees to just be self-aware of implicit bias, and so it's also like vigilance, to try.
That's great.
Yeah. All right, so the next question I guess I'll put out there for a discussion is, what is the biggest scientific question in Alzheimer's that scientists, clinicians, researchers will have to tackle in their careers?
In their careers.
Yeah, in our lifetime, I
I
guess.
guess the biggest of them all is, what's it going to take to get a cure for Alzheimer's disease and eliminate this as a scourge for mankind, right? That's probably the biggest, and then of course everyone's taken their own approaches to trying to contribute towards that ultimate goal. I mean, that would be my response.
I would say I agree with that, but I also think really clearly understanding what causes the disease and finding approaches that might prevent it at the beginning, but also ways to slow the progression or ultimately reverse the disease.
So we like to, in the Netherlands at least, we have some discussion about this question, and we would like to bring it down to smaller questions. So if you say we have to find a pill for Alzheimer, that question is too big. If we say we have to find preventive mechanisms, even that question is too big. So we like to focus a lot about how has the research developed in another field like cancer research, and how do they find treatments in cancer research, and what can we learn from that approach? Now, we took that question and went back to Alzheimer, and first we started to diverse the field of Alzheimer in about 46 different subunits. And then we investigated quite a lot at the moment. Can we find repurposing drugs? That's a different word for you, but repurposing drugs means that we use drugs which are already recognized by the FDA for other purposes in cancer research. They have been tested for toxic effects, and we're going to use some of these drugs in these 46 different subcategories and really find, do they have any effects? That's one thing. Secondly, and the most important thing, and now I speak for Europe because we have some discussion about that too, is, and that's my topic, of course, it's comorbidity. If we don't have a drug for Alzheimer, what can we do elsewhere to guarantee and to increase the quality of life of people who are suffering with Alzheimer's disease? So we like to do a lot of these side studies and to see, can we increase the quality of life of patients? That's basically it. And on the parallel, we have, of course, the big question. So the big question is, can we find a treatment for Alzheimer's disease? So all these questions are important to us.
And the other area that really needs to be addressed, and it's come to like a critical head with a number of clinical trials just not meeting primary endpoints is, are the guidelines, are we recruiting the right people into clinical trials? And so I think that the answer is no. They're finding that, it's mixed etiology. So there's the current standard for biomarkers or differential diagnosis. We might be recruiting the wrong people into clinical trials, and so there needs to be further studies on that, so that then if we actually do find the right drug, it's not so that it can actually make it to the market and it's not just getting shut down because it missed a primary endpoint.
I guess it's remarkable how much more work we still have ahead of us
Yeah.
to understand this disease, right?
Yeah.
And that's why we need funding from the non-profit organizations
Exactly.
to attract people who join the field.
That's
Yeah.
right.
It's essential.
Yeah.
And especially for new and bold ideas. I think there's a really special role for foundations to allow what's the word?
Non-incremental science, these really bold,
but to
high-risk
really
projects.
take a chance
Yeah.
and
High-risk
try
project.
high-risk projects and really try to look at something in a completely new light, bring in new investigators from other fields, and really, do these pilot projects that might otherwise not be funded by the larger institutions like NIH because they're too risky.
It only takes one idea to get forward for an effective treatment.
I think one of the things, if I look back in hindsight at the whole field, we've taken this incredibly reductionistic approach to a complex disorder like Alzheimer's. And I think as neurobiologists, we think of the brain as so special that we forget that it's connected to the rest of the body. And that's what Harry's been saying, that these comorbidities matter. So, and in part it was led by the revolution in molecular biology, right? We thought that we were going to understand how the body works and how disease happens just by knowing the DNA sequence of genes involved in all of these disorders. And it wasn't enough even in Alzheimer's to not only do we only focus on the brain, but within the brain we only focus on the hippocampus. If you look at some other region, God forbid, right? It was like, why are you looking at anything other than the hippocampus? And now I think we're seeing that the field is reacting to that and taking a much more holistic, integrative approach, because everything is interconnected. We know that even the microbiome seems to affect those.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that ultimately there are sex differences as well, and that a treatment may be one thing for a female and a different thing for a male. Mm-hmm. So I think this whole idea of personalized medicine or precision medicine is really, really
and different populations.
Gaining speed now, different populations, and really is very, very important to keep in mind. And that's going to be a further complication, I think, for clinical trials. But ultimately, it'll probably get us to where we need to be to find effective treatments.
I have a lot of hope.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
And research equals hope. There's no doubt about it.
So I guess this is our last question here. After decades of effort without a commercially available disease-modifying treatment for Alzheimer's disease or related dementias, help us explain why we need our donors to remain committed to supporting Alzheimer's disease.
Well, we still have people that are impacted by Alzheimer's disease, and we probably will for the foreseeable future. And so until that changes, we're going to constantly need to be researching and developing new diagnostic methods, new research into potential therapies, better understanding of the mechanism of action. And that's going to require funding to support research and new investigators. It's going to have to continue until this disease is itself a memory.
And I would say, just to add to that, that the Alzheimer's is not going away, and if anything, it's affecting more and more people. At this point now, in the U.S. alone, there are about 5.6 million people with Alzheimer's. That number is expected to grow to 14 million by 2050. The cost to the population and the government is extremely high. The healthcare system is not ready to handle that type of health load, I would say. So this is if anything, we need more researchers, we need to train more young people, get them involved, get them motivated to try to tackle this problem. This is a growing problem. It's not going to go away.
We need more, not less, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think in the United States right now, it's 1 out of every 5 Medicare dollars goes to care and treat Alzheimer's patients, and by the middle of the century, it's going to be 1 out of every 3 Medicare dollars.
Yeah, I think people have been saying it could bankrupt the entire healthcare system.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Talking about trillions of dollars on a national level. And when I mean, you're on the board. What's the statistic right now? It's like one person develops Alzheimer's every 65 seconds or so
Yeah.
in the United States.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And by mid-century, it's supposed to be 1 out of every 33 seconds or so.
Yeah.
I don't believe we will have one pill for Alzheimer. We will have a combi therapy like we see also with HIV. So we have a therapy which which we're going to treat different parts of Alzheimer and different forms, and that needs further research. We will see already in I think also here in the US, the increase in Alzheimer is less sharp as we had expected. It's a little bit, it's not going downwards, but it's simply not as sharp as we thought because of the changes in the lifestyle of the people. People are changing, diets are changing. I'm not sure in the US because I must confess, I can see a lot of people here with obesitas, and we're also going to look what is the role of obesitas in AD. That's another project which will be. What is the role of the environment on AD? What is the role of stress-related events, what people have in our society at the moment? So we do have a lot of challenges in which we need funding for to pursue.
And we can't just give up. I mean, we have to almost double down. Like what you said, research equals hope, and we need more funds to help, encourage these innovative ideas, attract young investigators, and retain them in the field, and so that we can serve, the families affected by this devastating disease.
I mean, treatment or cure is only going to come through research. Wishing and hoping is not going to get us there.
It's not a choice between treatment and cure, it's treatment and cure. Treatment, cure, and care. You all need them. So basically, for me, the most important part is that we have to bring it more to a personalized level. We have in Europe the big discussion about immigration. We got a big immigration from the Mediterranean and from Africa, of course. Questions which are coming there is, do we have to treat also people with a different genetic background in a different way related to Alzheimer? That's do we have different care houses for different populations? All these questions are there important.
Yeah, and disease has no borders. It's a global situation.